Welcome, everyone. I'm Adam Grant, organizational psychologist at Wharton. Thrilled to welcome you all to talk about the reskilling revolution. Our panelists are going to introduce themselves in a second, but just to set the stage a little bit, this is the 5-year anniversary of the reskilling revolution. The goal was to actually reskill 1 billion people with better education, training, knowledge, expertise. And so far, we're already on track to reach 716 million people. So I think it's safe to say that the billion is going to be hit. We know the world is changing rapidly. Everything we know pretty much about work is turning upside down. And I think we have both an opportunity and a responsibility to make sure that people are equipped for that transformation. We have a great group of leaders here to help us think that through. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. I think, Omar, you're up first.
Yeah, ABB. Omar Abosh, CEO of Pearson. Hello, everyone.
Joe Ukazoglu, Global CEO of Deloitte. Wonderful to be here.
Vimal Kapoor, good afternoon. I'm CEO of Honeywell.
Hi, my name is Claudia Azevedo. I'm CEO of a Portuguese-based multi-business company called Sonai.
Hi, I'm Jayant Chaudhary from India, Minister for Skills and School Education.
So let's start with the skills that actually need to be rethought and retaught. What are the core skills that need to be learned that aren't in play today? Anyone who wants it can take it.
I can kick it off. I would say we represent the industrial world. Our product services go into different industrial segments, aerospace, buildings, energy sector. And I think what skills we don't have or our customers don't have is to run operations, maintain equipment, shortage of pilots. So it was a nice to talk to come to a point that it's becoming a tipping point of lack of revenue or revenue risk, because these skills, people are retiring and the new skills required are not rapidly pacing up. So really have to solve this issue. And I really see AI as a great enabler. To me, this is a great gift, which is likely to solve this a very compelling problem ahead of us.
Well, maybe to build on that, I mean, this is a topic near and dear to us at Deloitte. We have nearly 500,000 people around the world. That's the core of our value proposition. Clearly, there's a technical element with the rapid proliferation of new technologies, and so we have academies set up relative to skill sets around engineering, data, cyber, cloud. But what we found is that's actually the easy part. The more challenging dimension is the leadership aspect of what it takes to thrive in an environment that's this rapidly changing. And the reality is we need people who are agile. We need people who are critical thinkers. And we feel like we're fighting a bit of a battle against societal trends right now because people are sort of more polarized, they're living in echo chambers, they're dug into their viewpoint. We want to create the opposite in terms of an optimal consultant, an optimal professional advisor, is someone who's open to different ideas, who's willing to take in information even if it might not agree with their predisposed point of view. So it's the leadership skills that are actually more challenging to develop than the technical know-how.
You need more politicians?
I don't think anyone would agree with that one.
Well, I'm happy where I am. But I think what he's saying points to the depth of domain knowledge which industry used to hanker for. Scale and depth, this is something that we hear constantly, constant refrain that we want scale and depth of skill before we put the hard dollars in and start investing. But it seems to me like we need more generalists also who can talk to the engineers and technicians and understand the market and create a product. If you want to create a product for now and for the future, you may not need to know how to code. So I think it's a dynamism that is now the currency of today, which I think all corporations are asking for. And we just have to see whether our traditional legacy educational systems are prepared to actually churn that product out.
I do think that speaks to a real challenge we're facing from a reskilling perspective, which is so much of the reliance we're doing on AI is dependent on assuming that the past is going to mirror the future, right? And we can only train AI on data from before, which may or may not be diagnostic of where we're headed. And I think what that means for a lot of us is we can't anymore put a premium on just being sort of fact collectors, right? People who accumulate knowledge. We actually need to be dot connectors, people who synthesize patterns and recognize changes that maybe AI is behind on. Is anybody working on this? Are you reskilling your workforces or your people around pattern recognition?
No, I think I'm glad you bring it up because there's a lot of discussion of agentic AI, and I think if you unpeel that, agents is a great way to assist human to get something better. But when I look at it in context of our business, human intervention or human judgment is a final say at the end of it. So if agents are doing a lot of repetitive work, humans can be spared to make more judgment or higher, deeper judgment. Because if you're consumed in a lot of repetitive tasks, you're consumed at that point of time. So I see the reskilling also to reimagine the jobs, because as new tools are coming, the jobs are getting redefined, more leadership skills are required, more decision making is required, more judgment is required, and it's less about doing things which are, I wouldn't say, have been done many times before, which are repetitive, and that's evolution which we all have to observe and make a change there.
But isn't AI already doing creative tasks that we assumed the human mind is only capable of doing?
Yeah, the minute you say dot connecting, Adam, I immediately think of AI, actually. AI is amazingly brilliant at pattern recognition. So actually, one of the areas that's more surprising, if you look at things like the O3 model from OpenAI more recently, is actually how you can augment deep scientific researchers. Yep. So in human science, by the time you become a postdoc, you're down to an incredibly narrow domain of depth of specialization. So you actually can't see what's happening in the other, even closely related domains. The AI can, if we train it to do that. So actually, turning AIs into collaborators as research assistants can be incredibly powerful for us. But that does require us to learn a whole bunch of new skills. And imagine, to the agentic comment that Vimal just made, how is a manager going to divide tasks between the human workers and the digital workers? Today, most of the AI that we think about is a collaborative tool for an individual contributor. It's not yet been thought through about how do you apply it to a team and how do you chunk up the work across teams. So I think we're going to see a ton of development of work in those areas.
Claudia, what does that look like in your world at Sone?
Well, we try to look at it as half-half. So we're sort of reskilling in hard skills, digital, technology, another half leadership, empathy. If people are going to do more human jobs, we need also to train that. And it's actually a skill that we are losing, an interpersonal skill. So that most of our training hours, I say, would be divided half-half.
I heard something interesting talking to that. At Davos, this is where you hear all the interesting things. Head, heart, and hand. That describes what we really need. Your heart needs to be in the right place. You need to empathize. And your head is about the brilliance of your mind. But you need the hand. You still need the plumbers and the carpenters and the electricians and the fitters. So that's a description I heard. I thought that was spot on.
I think on the heart empathy theme, I was stunned in the past year. I did think that was one of the uniquely human skills at this time last year. And the number of experiments that have come out showing that if you're interacting with in a chat interface and you don't know whether it's a human or an AI back, and then afterward you're asked how supported and seen do you feel, the AI is more empathetic than the average human.
Adam, one of the things that we're learning this year, so at Pearson we deliver the GED program in the US. For people who don't know that, there are 40 million adults in the United States who don't have a high school diploma, and typically for very sad reasons. But then they come back later on in adulthood to get the high school diploma in the form of a GED. What we found is when we use AI tools for those students, it helps them overcome shame. The shame of asking questions in public, that they're embarrassed to ask their teacher, and that they can ask their AI, and actually they find the AI sufficiently easy to get along with or empathetic that they can learn from that.
Think about, Adam, how quickly the conversation has changed. Yeah. A couple years ago, we sat on a panel like this, and the sort of consensus was, well, humans will have more time to focus on what they're good at. And people brought up two things. One was sort of EQ and empathy. Yep. The technology's actually proved to come way up the curve and be better. And two, creativity. The technology is winning out relative to idea generation. Yep. And so now we're having to rethink, what are those uniquely human skills? And it's a very different conversation. It comes down to agility. It comes down to being able to drive change. Because that's one of the biggest learnings of the past year, is that people are resistant. And so those who are actually able to win the hearts and minds, who are able to overcome the fears, who are able to illustrate how is this actually going to make your life as a professional, as an employee, better. Not just convince you that the company is going to do better, that's all great, but if you don't see your role in it, you're going to resist it. And the more people that resist it, the more the bureaucratic gears within companies actually serve as an impediment to adoption.
I think Joe's onto something really critical, actually, here, which is, we can probably debate endlessly what are the uniquely human things, and you know, I don't know exactly where that gets us, but in an era where humans live longer and where we don't know the jobs of 10 years' time, the one thing that we absolutely have to teach people is learning to learn.
Yes.
It's absolutely like a critical thing that we need to do a lot more on. And actually learning science and neuroscience has progressed a ton in recent years, so we actually know a lot about it. It is not expensive, but the system doesn't know enough about it. The educational fabric doesn't know enough. And I think we could do a lot more on that front that can help humans thrive and adapt and change in the era that Joe's just been talking about.
Speaking to the nature of AI, and you know, politicians love naming and renaming things. I keep saying that instead of calling it artificial, because in the Indian context, artificial in Hindi you'll say nakli, sort of means it's not real and it's not at par with us. You can call it amorphic or shapeless because it's consistently changing shape and its role. So I call it amorphic intelligence. But I think what you're saying is if it can be creative, it can provide leadership, it could think out of the box, think for the future, at some point think collectively, talk to each other, then really what are we going to do, play cards?
Yeah.
Well, I think our job as CEOs is very important. We have to have a sense of direction because people are scared, they're afraid. Every time they read in the newspaper that, you know, we're going to lose I don't know how many jobs. And the empathy of everybody at all levels of the organization is saying, look, this is where I think we're going. We have to study, like do some workforce planning. These are the skills we need. And we're going to do this path together. And I think that empathy at all levels of the organization is what is going to take us forward.
But one part I'm going to add is I think where the current technology is helping is to make the people more productive much more rapidly than we had imagined. So if I say take many of the equipment we supply, easy example is say you have to run a plane, you need a pilot certified with 20, 30 year experience. That applies to many equipment which we supply. Those people are retiring. So if I'm an organization, I'm not going to find a 30-year experienced person, but can I give a 10-year experienced person a tool and confidence that you can do it? Mm-hmm. So that is the new environment we have to imagine. So it's a substitution or amplification, which it can provide. Now there's a possibility that human doesn't have leadership skills and still doesn't have a confidence to say, no, I can't do it. And that's still in the human. But the opportunity it is creating is to make people more productive, more skilled, more rapidly, which is one of the bigger challenges in multiple societies of having people which can be given job, but they're lacking some finite skills.
So does this mean we're leading to a skill-based hiring bridges?
It
rather
will.
than a formal degree? Or
I think so.
Well,
absolutely. Music to my ears.
So we published some research actually just this week on the cost of what's happening on the learn-to-earn conveyor belt. Sort of the way I joke about it is you put a toddler on the conveyor belt at one end, they graduate from a fancy place like UPenn Wharton at the other end, and they go to Wall Street. And that sort of general qualification pathway is clearly not enough. You have a whole range of vocational pathways and alternate skill pathways. And actually what we hear from employers is they want people with skills. And degrees can be part of that, but there are other ways as well. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future.
I think that applies to everybody, right? We need, our skill set has also become obsolete. So I think the beauty of reskilling, that it really applies to everybody. And if it's like, skills is much better than I have to go off 5 years for a degree, right?
There's a brilliant thing that an organization that I heard about is doing is it's targeting the older senior management, 50-year-old and above, saying we're going to teach you AI first.
Yeah.
So that the insecurity of those people in that particular category gets sorted.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of fear being built.
So just making this very real, I mean, making this real and tangible, you referenced the example of a specific use case that will be put in the hands of someone earlier in their career to take on a much more significant set of responsibilities that accelerates their own career growth. That's the kind of thing that's driving trust. What we see that doesn't drive trust is when there's a lot of hype and things get sold at an artificial level, and then it's put in the hands of people and they use it and it's giving them the wrong answer and it's not delivering on the promise, and that breaks trust. So this ability to actually refrain, as great as the potential use cases are, to make sure we're not overhyping it, that we're grounding it in the substantive reality of what the technology is capable of today, and that we're actually involving the people who will be impacted. Because where we've seen this fail is when you hand it over to a group of technology developers and they run off into a room, generally the adoption rate is close to zero. When you build a cross-functional team that includes the people from the heart of the business, the actual workers from the function that are going to use that, and you pair them up with the technologists, you get something very valuable, and the adoption rate is embraced.
So I want to bring this back to this skills-based hiring question for a second, because on the one hand, I see the appeal. We don't want to just use pedigrees and credentials to decide who gets an opportunity. We want to open doors for people who have lacked access. On the other hand, very often, as we're seeing now, the skills that you hire people for today are no longer relevant to the problems you're solving tomorrow. And so I think, Omar, to your point about the ability to learn, or Joe, as you described it, agility being the most critical skill, how do you think about assessing that? I'll throw out an example I saw recently at a call center. You go through an interview at a call center, you then finish the interview and you're asked, how do you think that went? And you do a self-assessment of your strengths and weaknesses in the interview, and then they give you a do-over. And the people they hire are not the ones who aced the first interview. They're the ones who showed the most growth from the first to the second. Yeah. Because then you can actually observe their motivation and ability to learn.
We're going to see a ton more of that, Adam, in the future. And we announced a technology partnership just last week where we're going to embed a lot of our assessment and skilling capabilities into tech platforms to meet people where they are at work. So imagine you are working in a call center in a foreign language. The AI afterwards can say to you, hey, like you could have said that sentence a bit differently, it would have been easier for them to understand. So you can literally use it as a job aid during people's work, but to the point that Joe said, if you're going to put out this, I don't really love the amorphous AI, but like the ambient AI, if you're going to put the ambient AI out there, then you need to do it through the open front door, clearly declared, and get the trust so that people who are involved with it understand what they're dealing with.
I think company culture has a lot to do with it, right? And if you're a know-it-all organization, you don't feel the need to learn. But if you get the corporate culture that everybody feels that they have to learn, that being curious is the biggest skill they can have, I think that will help a lot on this way.
So we've got 4 CEOs who are trying to build learning organizations and reskill entire workforces. We have a minister who's trying to reskill an entire country. What are the practices?
Small country.
Yeah, just only second largest in the world, right? What are the practices and policies that you found most helpful and also most surprising for moving that needle?
So I think just the room already has a sense of the scale, but we're talking about 23, 24 million young people joining the workforce every year. And even though we are training in our long-term training programs about 2.5 to 3 million every year, and in the short-term training programs over the last 10 odd years, we've trained 16 million people, it is still nothing. And also, as a point to what you're saying, that what we are training them is that what really industry requires. So there's a massive amount of retooling, but what Vimalji said is point. And it is something that all developing countries and similar economies like India, younger countries, the younger demographics can take, is that if you don't have a legacy system, you can, or even if you do, you can immediately leapfrog using technology. So my task right now is to use convergence, use a whole of government approach, break the silos, and with our national education policy, we have a mandate to reform our education system, to integrate vocational from schools going forward, to make it a flexible learning pathway, to creditize every aspect of it, to show value, to make it aspirational, to have a diploma program, not necessarily hanker and run after a degree, if that's what industry wants. So it's a process. I think the process orientation always helps because you got to break it down into a series of tasks. And that is how we need to view jobs as well. So one of the principal asks, and here at Davos, one of the things that we've been trying to push for, what India is trying to take leadership with, is to get governments, to get countries together and sit down and say, okay, this is a job. It's broken down into these tasks or these competencies or these occupation standards, and this is now going to be a global standard. So someone who's a nurse or an architect in India can come very easily slip into that role in Germany or in Switzerland without having a non-trade tariff barrier kind of situation where they just say, you have nothing, you've learned nothing, you're unskilled. So, and in India, outward mobility has always been an aspect of our soft power. People call it brain drain, but also in a way, our best export, our best resource, it's not our companies, it's our people.
I love this idea of breaking down jobs into tasks. We have some data on this. Amy Resnesky, Justin Berg, and I did a large experiment at a tech company recently where we asked people to think about the skills they wanted to develop and basically tried to instill a growth mindset, and found that had no impact whatsoever on their happiness or their job performance. Like, wait, what's going on here? Something's missing. What we realized was a lot of people had fixed mindsets, not just about their own skills, but about their jobs. They thought their tasks were basically set in stone, and their interactions were determined by people above them who really were dictating their schedule. And we said, what if you take your job as a flexible set of building blocks? You can decide on the margin which tasks you prioritize, which ones maybe you delegate or offload. You can decide which interactions are important for you, and try to innovate on the margins of your job in ways that also allow you to develop skills. When we did that, 6 months later, spike in happiness, either no decrease or an increase in job performance. And I think that's a really good reminder to say, increasingly, jobs are not designed for individual people. And mass customizing them is really hard, and so we need to give people a little bit of autonomy to evolve their jobs or craft their jobs in ways that advance the mission.
Well, this is going to be essential. So a bunch of the conversation this week has been about the agentic workforce. That relies upon being able to deconstruct jobs and manage on an integrated basis your digital and your human workforce. And this concept of growth mindset, the example you used of the call center and how they're screening for employees of who shows the most growth between the first round and the second round, we just updated our own leadership frameworks at Deloitte. And the number one skill set that rose to the top, it wasn't about whether you've run 4 P&Ls or you've worked in 18 geographies, all those are great. The number one that rose to the top was growth mindset. Because everybody says that they are open to feedback. Everyone walks in a room and they say, I'm really here to listen. And then some people go on for the next 10 or 15 minutes to sort of do everything possible to refute what they said up front and explain why each idea that comes up, yeah, we've thought of that and it doesn't work here.
And by the way, then we promote that person, mistaking their confidence for competence.
That may happen, but I mean, on the skills deconstruction thing, I mean, we're totally supportive of that. I know the WEF is pushing the global skills taxonomy. I've got one challenge with it, but actually you can take the job roles out of an HR system of a company, you can deconstruct them into skills, you can say which skills will be impacted by AI and automation, and then you can, and this is the hard bit, is define the job corridors to say, all right, these skills are going to be taken up by automation, these other ones need to be reconfigured into new roles, and now we need to find the job corridor for the people. And so we do that for customers. It's actually not that easy. And you can see it's easier in technology where the codification of coding skills, for example, you could do that. When you get to something like nursing, with a lot of hands-on things, it gets a bit messier. And of course, in the world that we're in, these skills are going to evolve so fast all the time, and so creating something fungible and fluid is going to take some work.
Claudia, I'm curious to hear about what this means for training.
Well, we're doing 3 things. So internally in the company, we're sort of mapping out where we need more resources. And for example, as a retailer, we have cashiers. We could say at any level of the organization, and we're saying, like, there's 3 options. Some upskilling, going to the part of the store where beauty advisors and the fresh salaries are higher, it's more human. Or, for example, in a totally different business that we own, which is opticians or hearing aids, which there's a lack of technicians in Europe, you can reskill to that. Part of it is your time, part of it is the company that's going to give your time. So we're doing that and making sure that in every place that we see, we can reskill. People. We're also leading in Portugal a public-private partnership with the government. Basically, we got the 40 biggest companies in Portugal to see what skills they need. We designed a training program, and the government and is doing the training and the funding for that, and it's fantastic. that has been one of my biggest surprises, that it's much bigger than the sum of the parts, because having all these companies, having the government together is really has gone very well. But very difficult to scale up, because you train people 6 months and 9 months. It's great. Each person that you train is life-changing for that person, but difficult to scale up. So the third thing that we're doing at the moment with Telefónica in Spain is a digital platform, the New Career Networks, using artificial intelligence. People upload their skills, they answer a few questions. Inside the platform, there are training that had been curated, and companies post what skills they need. And so that is a digital all the training is digital. So we're working at the moment on the 3 platforms and learning and trying to go faster.
I like the digital marketplace.
Yes, you can look it up. It's called New Career Network. It's available in English and Spanish, Portuguese.
We have the Skill India Digital Hub, which was launched a year ago. It has 10 million registered users. It's part of the India stack, so it's a DPI. So we're trying to build that out. All the functionality that you just mentioned, from linking as a marketplace, getting entries for jobs, and also the whole skilling ecosystem, visibility along the line.
So I'm going to present a slightly different point of view. For a company like us, which make products, we really have to reskill our product managers, because our products can be totally reimagined on what it can do based upon the new type of workforce, but at the same time, how the product capability can change with embedded AI into it. If you do not reimagine the product and you try to do the skilling portion alone, you are solving half the problem. And our product managers seems to be a very small population in a big company like us, but they have a multiplier effect at a huge scale. So I think looking at the problem of that lens to say, have I reimagined the product itself, because all of a sudden it has much more compute. You can do much more in a different manner. So I think that's one segment one has to pay attention. Second, which I personally a lot more attention, is the leadership team have to do immersive learning. They have to practice AI and do something different. It's not about reading a book to say, I read a book on the weekend, No, that is not the point. What are we going to do differently as a leader and adopt a different practice on how we operate? And our work style, work practices are changing, and we are walk the talk so that we can really preach the practice. But to me, those are the 2 critical segments in a companies like us where we can make a huge impact.
Vimal, that last point is exactly where I want to take the conversation next, which is obviously the tone is set at the top. You've all been doing some shifting of how you think about your leadership skills. What's the biggest reskilling move that you've made personally in the last year?
For me, it's every day. I was in the opposition, now in government, so a lot of learning. And my political constituency was farmers in rural India. And here it's about younger people talking about technology and what's about to come. So I think it's every day for me is reskilling. And that's the approach we should have, right?
I spent 35 years in the technology sector, and about a year ago I moved to the education and learning sector. So I'm back to basics as a baby student, learning a completely new segment. I couldn't say that I knew much about the space. And indeed, just immerse yourself and learn as fast as you can.
And this modeling by example, I'm sorry.
No, it says, for me, Davos is a fantastic way to check into the year, right? Every January, come here and say, well, these are what people are talking about. I don't know absolutely anything about this. So I have to learn during the year for the next Davos check-in.
This modeling by example is essential. I love your it's not about reading a book. If we're telling people to do something, it's falling on deaf ears. If they see us doing it ourselves, and hopefully they would have some belief that we've done something right in our careers to be entrusted with these positions, then it lends itself in incremental credibility. So when I come here and I'm going to participate on a panel, when there's a set of questions that comes out in advance, I love to feed it into the LLM and to be able to tell people, now, am I going to use all of it? And am I still going to use my judgment relative to weeding out some of the hallucinations? Of course. But it's an incredible creativity generation mechanism. If I'm looking at our financial results and I'm actually using some of our finance private LLM capabilities, analyzing performance, using the predictive capabilities, talking about how some of the insights actually came out of a Gen AI application, then the light bulb goes off. But we have to model it ourselves.
I do feel that the record needs to show that you shouldn't stop reading books. It's just, having written half a dozen of them, I think the deep thinking that goes into formulating the knowledge that goes into a book, it doesn't exist in any other medium that I have exposure to. But I think that's the beginning of learning, not the end, right? The goal is to actually put that knowledge into practice, not just to accumulate it in your head.
I mean, and Adam, as you know very well, passive learning, so just reading and then cramming for the exam is not that effective. Adaptive learning, where yes, reading, but then you interact with an AI that takes you through a Socratic dialogue, challenges you, practice retrieval, then you learn properly. So we need books at the source.
I can share my experience. I started my new role about 18 months back, and I grew up in the business. I was a frontline person selling our offerings to our customers, project managers. Now I become CEO of a public company. To me, investor is a set of people who understand a very different language, even though I'm telling the same thing. So I have to relearn my skills to tell the same story in a different manner. And when you go to employees, they want to hear the same story in a different manner. So I guess reskilling as a human has been a personal experience. You have to say the same thing to 3 different constituencies and still have to be honest, but you have to reskill to make it consumable by very different audience. If you don't do that, you pay a consequence for that, because employees don't feel you motivated. You are a motivator, get the followership. Customers say, this person is so high level, he's on to details. But investors said, you're in too much of details, I don't want to know it. So how do you balance very diverse, and it's a skill which you have to reorient to yourself. And I think a lot of current tools help you to consume that easily. I think we're blessed to have those tools with us, and I think our prior generation did not have that opportunity.
I think there's something really powerful there. There's a recent Frank Flynn study showing that leaders were, on average, 9 times more likely to be criticized for under-communicating than over-communicating.
Absolutely.
And it's so easy to understand why this happens, because once an idea makes sense to you, you explain it once and you think everybody else has got it, and you suffer from a curse of knowledge, not realizing how unfamiliar that idea is. Yeah. And I think what a lot of leaders don't realize is, if you over-communicate, the worst thing that happens is people say, shut up, we get it. And then you know the message has landed. If you under-communicate, people think that either you don't know what you're doing or you don't care.
Right.
Yeah.
And the reality is that being able to frame that message in a way that resonates with a particular audience, the human brain is still pretty good at. I'll take that over the elephant.
For now?
For now.
So let me ask you all this. In 2025, what is your personal reskilling goal? What's the one thing you want to get better at?
AI.
Oh, come on, it's low-hanging fruit. What about AI?
Learning the tools, I have no idea.
Okay.
I'm talking about AI. I don't use them.
Oh, well, that's going to change tomorrow.
I mean, every executive should at least do 10 hours playing with LLMs, at least, and really test yourself with it and challenge it and ask it to challenge you. And I think you'll enjoy the experience, actually.
Prioritization. If we look, both me personally, within our organization, across our client base, there's no shortage of great ideas in terms of the usage of Gen AI. The issue is that people are spread too thin. So I was just over with a client, actually. It's almost late coming over here because it went long. And this is a Fortune 50 CEO. And he says to me, do you see anybody that has something in the Gen AI arena beyond proofs of concept? So everybody's talking a big game, but that ability to actually make some bets and pick a few and really roll up your sleeves and do the hard work in the organization to implement it at scale, as opposed to having a bunch of great ideas, that's my priority. And frankly, that's where some additional focus is needed.
Okay, so we've got prioritization, meta prioritization. We have AI tools. What else?
I would say AI, and actually this morning I was looking up like executive courses a week, really to immerse myself in the States, but that's probably what I'm going to do in 2025.
I would say I will add to that, immersive learning to the extent where such tools have been successful, like cars are becoming autonomous. What are the implications of that, say, other sectors? So that's immersive learning. Not that you sit in the car. I mean, to me, really understanding that deeply, that what caused to get here and what is out of possible. I'm spending a lot of my time because that is deep implication on the businesses we do. Because if car is autonomous, plane can also be autonomous, right? In the end, it's a vehicle which carries passenger. And it's been intriguing to learn the development of semiconductor industry, the chips, the software. And I think it's just, we all have to adapt to the learning, whatever is applicable. I mean, I have a simple mantra. The day you stop learning, I'm afraid I'll be out of job very quickly. I mean, it probably went out of weeks or if not months. It's just imperative in today's world. You have to just refresh your skills, be it leadership, be it technology, engaging with customers. I think it's a constant learning all the time.
Omar, what's on your reskilling agenda?
So I want to go deeper on vocational learning and new collar skills. I think there are a lot of people that we've left behind in recent years. And actually, the advent of this AI allows us to help address a much broader population if we're clever about it. And that's a zone I want to go deep on.
My fear is that the more we talk about immersive AI and that we don't need domain knowledge, you can just learn it on the fly, the more you are making it okay to not really take a deeper dive into anything. So it's a dumbing down of all of us. So to what you are saying, that we must think about what you can do to the large sections of population that are actually doing the real hard tasks and who've done 2-year programs to learn to do that, work with their hands. I think we need to find solutions for that.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to reframe what is reskilling, because too many times it's sort of the ones that are left behind. And I think reskilling should be aspirational. And the questions you're asking, how are you going to upskill yourself or reskill? And it's very crucial to tell people in all layers of the organization that it's okay. It's okay to fear for your job, but there's solutions out there that you can acquire new skills and progress in your career. And so I'd say reframing reskilling is important.
I do think there's an opportunity there. I loved a study recently by Sharon Parker and her colleagues looking at how people adapt to advanced manufacturing technology that was essentially replacing their jobs. And what people did to cope with that was they paid attention to what the robots were bad at, and then they derived meaning in their work from outsmarting robots. And I think that's a great way to put reskilling into action. I want to go to the audience now. We'd love to take some questions. I will just put a few ground rules in place. Number one, Andrew Ross Sorkin always reminds us the questions end in question marks. Number two, I'm going to ask the panel, let's get 1 or 2 people to comment so that we can get to as many questions as possible. Right over here. And I think a mic will come to you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm an organizational psychology student at Columbia, so I'm still working on getting to your level of just understanding in this space. But I wanted to call out sort of one thing that I think is the elephant in the room, which is that, I am one of very few Black people in this room, and I consider that an incredible privilege and an opportunity and potential responsibility. But I think it is kind of a representation of how are we having some of these conversations in a way that AI doesn't deepen the digital divide. And what I mean is not so much about, Black women. I'm talking blue-collar workers. I'm talking individuals who don't fit the traditional stereotype of what we think is professional. And I'm curious how you are thinking about that in your respective organizations. And I really do love, Adam, that you mentioned, getting unstuck, and you've mentioned leapfrogging as well, Hon'ble Minister. So I think that makes us think a little bit, and I'm curious how you're thinking about that.
2 aspects from a completely non-technical person who's never used AI. One is that the algorithms that are the designers, the basic data set that is being used to come up with these solutions must also be diversified, must be open source as much as possible. I'm speaking from a developing country point of view. So data sovereignty is also important. The data set is important. And the other aspect is the user side, that AI readiness needs to be rolled out at a massive scale. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to learn, I'm going to get my ministry, my staff, officers together, sit down and learn all the tools, and then roll it out in the schools as a startup.
Yeah, the minister's 100% right. The more the AI scales, the more the price point comes down, the more accessible it can be. So let's assume, hopefully, that we go in that direction. The bit that I'm focused on is, in addition to the AI complication, we have a demography challenge in most of the West. We're running out of workers. So actually that means companies and organizations need to find new sources of talent, new pools of talent, and they need to tap pools of talent that they're not used to historically tapping. And so we work with organizations on what we like to call their ships, their mentorships, their apprenticeships, their internships, so that they can find talent sources earlier and point them to their organizations. And I think that's a critical way to partially tackle what you're talking about.
Let's go back to the audience over here. Microphone is coming, next one over there.
Wonderful panel. Colin Groth, Chief Advancement Officer, Strive Together, the 2024 Schwab Collective Social Innovation Award winner. We lead a national network in the U.S. of 70 communities working to build cradle-to-career pipelines in local communities. One, in fact, is actually called Learn to Earn Dayton. We're launching a new initiative with Gates and Walton Foundation to think about what are the high-quality pathways for young people to good jobs. What advice would you give to local communities trying to bring together education systems and employers to actually make sure that the skills you all are needing are getting into traditional education systems?
Well, first, congratulations on your award. I actually think there's a significant connection between both of the questions that have been asked. And frankly, if you ask me sort of what's my main concern around taking this Gen AI journey as a society, it is none of the technical impediments. We will figure out the technology, we will figure out the change management. The issue that keeps me up at night is the societal implications and earning trust that we're actually gonna do this in a way that benefits all communities and that is not gonna exacerbate some of the divides. And so that raises issues around trustworthy AI, that raises issues around making certain that the data sets actually are part of the solution to bias as opposed to exacerbating it. And frankly, this is an area where it requires a very significant public-private partnership between us as institutions, companies, local governments, the education system, so that there is an insight into what are the skills that are most relevant to us, and that can be cascaded down into the inner workings of those who are actually dealing with the next generation.
Maybe I'll just chime in on this one quickly to say, I think too many schools are reacting to AI by saying this is cheating and we need to ban it.
Yeah.
The reality is students are going to use it anyway. So my colleague Ethan Malik, I thought, created a great alternative. He said, what we need to do is we need to give assignments where you expect the use of AI and you show your prompts. And then we're going to score you on how well you're collaborating with AI tools to come up with better ideas. And I've implemented that in my own classroom. It's been very powerful. And I think we should encourage that kind of experimentation because it's going to happen whether we do or not. Over here.
Hi, first of all, wonderful panel. I'm a Schwab social innovator, like Colin there. I work on livelihoods of persons with disability. So first of all, thank you, Minister, for talking about the data sets. I was like, yay, you know. So my question is a little policy related. It could be with the government or with companies. One of the insights we have is that actually we've never built aspiration and need for the new jobs. And we found that when we gave candidates, even with severe disability like autism or neurodiversity or deaf-blind, the opportunity to go into companies and walk in and just see what's going on, they start building the aspiration. So the first question I had was, we have this Apprenticeship Act. I just want to know how well it is working. And I just wondered if we I feel sometimes companies are resistant to that. Whom am I going to get? And I'm wondering if we could just convert it into an Opportunities Act where people can just come spend half a day, but just start building that aspiration. Oh my God, this is what it is. They build aspiration actually for the people. They see the culture and things get built, and I think it can answer a little bit of these millions that we are talking about, and I feel strongly about India. I'd like it from a company perspective also. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so India is doing that. The Apprenticeship Act, as you pointed out, it's an old act made in the 60s, and it's a mandate. Not all companies follow that mandate. They're doing it on their own without perhaps giving us the information. It's a very powerful tool. So in that scheme, we've covered 3.5 million people up till now. And the PM internship program, where they're saying, take people who've never been employed and give them the red carpet treatment in the 500 top companies, they've given a 10 million target. So you're absolutely right. And the companies need to understand that, okay, it might be painful to do the whole registration, informing government. There's a process, you've got to jump through the hoops. But at the end of the day, you're going to be able to retain those employees, expose them to your work culture, and save your money that you're spending on recruitment and HR.
I can add two things. As a public company, we see our responsibility, of course, to create shareholder value because we are owned by public shareholders, but also to grow our business so that we can create more jobs. And I'm always very sensitive that if you do not do that, you're not meeting the social purpose for which a company exists to create jobs. And we as Honeywell has been very active on internship programs. I was sharing with the colleagues earlier, we hiring 1,700 interns in 2024. It's our small contribution in this process. Our turn rate is almost 70%, almost that many people get employed, and we just keep ramping it up, and it's global. And because it's distributed, it by nature is, brings all kind of skills, all backgrounds of people, and it makes us a better company all the time. So to me, those are the two opposite ends of our responsibility: create shareholder value, but don't forget you have to create jobs, because that's why we exist in the society.
You heard it here first. The purpose of the company is not to make profits, it's to create jobs. I love that vision.
Different panel, Adam.
Yeah, well, let me just wrap us up really quickly and say one practice I think is underutilized is a returnship, where you give internships and apprenticeships to people who have been out of the workforce, disproportionately working mothers. Great opportunity for reskilling. I want to thank all of our panelists. I think this has been a really rich and surprisingly entertaining discussion. I think that the basic idea here is pretty simple, which is skill gaps are a huge barrier to business transformation, to economic growth, and to opportunity for people. And I would love to invite all of you to join the reskilling revolution, to try to close some of those gaps and create more inclusive and more sustainable economies. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to our panelists. See ya.